okay, when I was getting a loan for a house, I was 20, 25, 26 years old, and I said, oh, you're a Kulchinsky, no problem, you'll pay off your debt. Because my grandfather started the credit union. So of course, and his picture's there, you know, on the wall, and because my name basically has credibility, right? Some people maybe call it wasta, but only wasta if I don't pay off the debt, right? But I would always pay off the debt because I'm a Kulchinsky. The point is, that's a traditional society. Now you're in an industrial society, which means you got all these people moving into the cities. And they have to what? Live side by side. They got to interact with each other. They have to solve problems collectively, right? So they need to develop networks. You guys with me so far?
Yeah.
So what happens is you have these different organizations where members have these kind of ties that bind, okay? And that's what civil society is all about. And what makes it a civil society, it is outside the sphere of government. And even in totalitarian regimes, you still have civil society, but where does it go? Underground. It goes underground, under the table. It's nascent. It's underneath. Okay, guys with me so far? So civil society. So what we're talking about here is we're talking about organizations that are and this is because a lot of it has to do because of information and communication technologies, because of globalization, is that now we have groups around the world that are bound together because they believe in something, right? And they're powerful enough to do what? Affect nation states and how they behave in the international arena. For example, environmental groups. Okay? Environmental groups can affect the decision to some nation states essentially make. And the thing that it's important here about NGOs is that they basically challenge the power of countries. Because a country has to now respond to a non-state actor. And typically, depending on how you define NGOs, a lot of NGOs tend to work with, okay, Doctors Without Borders. Do they have a political agenda? You guys ever heard Doctors Without Borders?
Yeah.
Those doctors come in, put their lives on the line to save those babies that are being blown apart during, domestic, internal conflicts, right? They don't have a political agenda. They're just acting out their Hippocratic oath, right? They're taking care of children, taking care of families, women, older people that are caught in this war, the wars around the world. So Doctors Without Borders, right? The point is, and they get funded. And sometimes some of these organizations work with IGOs, such as the United Nations. Okay? You guys with me so far? All right, so transnational terrorist groups. Folks, this is important. This is a post-September 11th phenomenon. Now, what does that mean, post-September 11th phenomenon? Prior to the September 11th phenomena, when one talked about a terrorist group, the underlying belief within the international community was terrorism was state-sponsored. In other words, if you have a terrorist group, you don't go after the terrorist group, you go after the state that's sponsoring the terrorist group. And what has emerged over the last 10 years is what? The terrorist groups aren't state-sponsored. They may exist in a weak state. Now, what does that mean? They may have a camp in a weak state, in a failed state. Now, what does that mean? Does anyone know understand what I just said? Because I used some terms to make a point. What was it? What am I saying here? Yeah.
You said a failed state is one that the government doesn't enforce rules and it's not.
Yeah, they can't. You got a camp within your borders and you can't do anything about it because it can kick the derriere out of your military. Okay, that's a weak state. A state that can't say no. You have to play by our rules. We have rules and regulations in our nation state, and if you don't follow, we're going to arrest you. Right? If you can't do that, you're exactly in trouble because what's going to happen is now you can have these groups having their camps. The flip side, on the other hand, is that states may want to let these groups there because they're going to use them in some shape or form. Right? They may not believe. They may not support, but it creates a lot of noise within the region. Okay, so, but the point is that you don't essentially, you don't look at the state, you view the terrorist group as an autonomous entity. Now, what would be the neoliberal argument on dealing with these terrorist groups? Well, we know what a neorealist would do, right? What would they do? What would how would a neorealist handle this? You got a problem, you have a terrorist camp. How do you get rid of the terrorist camp? Huh? I know, but again, how would you take, you believe in power, you believe in force, how would you take care of this business?
They'll just take them out.
You take them out, right? Okay? How would a neoliberal do it? A neoliberal wouldn't, and this is important, it's not that they would not threaten to use force, okay? Because you don't want to be perceived as being weak. But what would they focus on? Helping the country do what? Become more stable, right? That is you're trying to improve the viability of the state. And if the state can now function properly, and trade occurs and prosperity begins to take place within the state, what's going to happen to these terrorists?
It wouldn't matter about them, they'd be kicked out.
They're going to be kicked out, right? In other words, people aren't going to want them there because they're disrupting their what? Their ability to have a life, right? There's always, on every margin you have radical groups. But the point is either on the margin or they're in the majority. And if everybody's unhappy, they're likely to what? To have more power, more leverage within society. But if the majority of the society is happy, these terrorists become marginalized, right? They got to find another country to establish their camps. You guys follow me so far? So the argument from a neoliberal point of view is let's help the government, help it become sustainable, let's open up, engage in some sort of trade, let's help the nation state become sustainable, help it with economic development, and then those economic forces just push out the bad problems on their own, without us having to come in and destroy the village to make it better. Because that's the argument, right? You got to destroy something to make it better, which doesn't make sense from a neoliberal point of view. Okay? All right. Multinational corporations. What are multinational corporations? Companies. Well, can someone give me an example of a well, first of all, multinational corporations have emerged as a phenomenon. They've always been around. They've always been around. Okay? Ford, multinational. Ford does business in North America, South America, but this Ford. Is GMC, what's GMC? Who has a GMC in here? Nobody has a GMC in here? Okay, whose brother has a GMC in here? You guys know what a GMC is?
Yes.
Okay, can you buy them in Kuwait?
Yes.
I love GMC. I think they're. Ever drive one of those? Their engines are so. I mean, okay, granted they're not a Lamborghini or Maserati or a Mercedes, whatever, but those engines are very, very powerful. Okay. Bottom line is you can buy GMC anywhere in the world, right? So the point is companies that basically you can purchase or you can purchase their products anywhere around the world are multinational. But the fact that they can be competitive internationally means they have to have a structure in place that allows them to be efficiently run corporations, which means what? If you're going to be selling cars in the Middle East, you may do what? You may open up one of your factories in Turkey, right? Yeah. That's a multinational corporation. That is, it has its presence in different countries around the world, okay? And because of that, multinational corporations have become actors in the international arena, in the international arena, because they can affect foreign policy. They can affect the behavior of one country vis-a-vis the behavior in another country. Well, what do you think? Let's say, for example, let's say you own sugar plantations somewhere, and suddenly this radical comes in and decides to nationalize the sugar plantations. What happens to your profit? What happens to your profits? They're going to get a hit, so what are you going to do? You're going to lobby someplace, particularly the people where you have WASTA. You're going to go to Capitol Hill and say, we got to get this commie out of there because he's hurting our profits, right? This is un-American, right? So when you go to Washington, D.C., so what happens? Remember the movie? Okay, that's what multinational corporations do. Okay? You know, they can destabilize, they can work to destabilize a government because the government's cutting into their profit margins. Okay? Everybody with me so far? Which means they can affect how nation states interact with each other. Okay? And take a look at these numbers. Look at this. This is the total revenue, okay, earned by countries, right? The highest is United States. Now this is an old number. It's kind of changed a little because China's moved up. But what do you notice when you get to number 20, 21? And actually, I should update this table here because Apple has jumped up ahead of Exxon, by the way. What do you notice? This is the total revenue earned by a country. So you have some corporations that make more money. For example, in this particular table, Exxon makes more money than Turkey, or generates more revenue per year than, let's say, Turkey does. You guys see General Motors is number 34. British Petroleum, BP, right? So these are Royal Dutch Shell. These, notice, oil companies. Okay, the point here is that the revenue that this company generates exceeds the revenue of some countries, meaning that they have a vested interest in making sure the balance, the equilibrium within the system continues, right? Because they're benefiting by the system. All right, so multinational corporations typically they're always studied when we talk about when we talk about international relations. Now, so that's chapter 5. So let's just real quickly, chapter 2 was theory. Then we talked about global south, global north, global east. Then we've just talked about non-state actors, right? So what's the next chapter? I mean, let me just kind of, chapter 6 now is going to focus on decision making. So what's going to happen is that we have we've talked about all the different types of actors, okay? We've talked about different ways of studying their behavior within the international relations, okay? So now we're going to focus on decision making. An integral part, or an important part of the decision making process is actually also in chapter 9, which focuses on alliances and the balance of power. Meaning, why doesn't a country enter into a relationship with another country? Now, if you enter into this relationship and develop a structure above the nation state, that becomes an intergovernmental organization. You guys with me so far? If a state enters into a treaty with another state, that's an alliance. Okay? And you can have a bilateral treaty or you can have a multilateral treaty. So those are the major issues that we're still going to cover. And that's basically your first test. Got it? What happens with the second test, using all the knowledge you've accumulated, we're going to play the game. And what's the game? Decision making, forming alliances. You guys with me so far? Doing all the stuff that we studied here, and you're going to be role playing and using it in the simulation that I'm going to create. What's that? No, that's the game we start after we come back from the break. Okay? And finally, the last 3 weeks of the course, what we're going to focus on is we're going to focus on the different issues, such as the environment. Okay? Focus on trade, all these different things that require collaboration. All right? You guys with me so far? Any questions? Any issues? See you guys.
أول مرة بالله بدري بدأ يجي بالله